Hi, I'm Nicholas, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to make a lightsaber. Yeah, out of a cardboard tube. I know it sounds pretty crazy, but by the end of this tutorial, you should be able to do this. Yeah, pretty neat, right? Well, let's get down to business. The steps for this tutorial include the following: a physical prop and recording, setup and animation in the open source software Blender, and some final edits along with audio additions. According to Star Wars, all lightsabers start with a kyber crystal, but because we're not in a space fantasy, we have to start with something simpler. A humble cardboard box will do for ours. And now that we have our hilt, we can move on to the next part. With the hilt done, we now need a blade. What I've done here is I've taken a cardboard tube that I made because I don't have another type of tube, and I've put it into the hilt. What I'm doing here is I'm marking the blade at various intervals, which will make tracking it in VFX software easier later. You can use really any kind of tube. I decided to go for a cardboard one because I'm a broke college student who can't make it over to the hardware store. But once the equidistant marks are all the way down the blade, your blade and hilt are completely together and ready to go. And what you can do next is go out, record yourself swinging things around, just do cool things. You have a blade, you've got a lightsaber, it's easy enough. Now what I have to have here is a disclaimer. This is not an introduction to how Blender works. This is not an introductory tutorial, but I have linked some better introductions to the tutorials down below. The first thing you need to do once you start a new scene in Blender is to delete all of the basic objects. This can be done with A, X, Enter. Now tabbing into a perspective mode, use Shift A to add in a new plane and rotate this plane 90 degrees along the X axis. Tabbing back out of edit mode, add in a camera using Shift A and camera, and then drag it along the Y axis so that it faces towards the plane. You can tab into the camera using 0 on your number pad. Now editing the plane, we will scale this so it fills the camera fully. And now we can add the shader for the video. Go into the shader editor, add a new shader, rename it to video, set the shader type to emission, change the color to an image texture, and then go ahead and select your video from here. To keep everything nice and lined up, we're going to go ahead and change the vector type to window so that it clips with the camera and keeps the orientation nice. Also set the frames to like 1,000,000 and turn auto refresh on. Now you should be able to see your video play around in the timeline. Now that the whole scene's set up, we can get to the real magic. What you can do here is Shift A to add a new plane in, then drag it just in front of the video plane. We're going to enter edit mode and rotate it 90 degrees along the X axis as well, and then hook each of the vertices on this plane to a new object. This can be done through the vertex menu or through Control H new object. Once that's done, it's a lot easier for use later if we scale down the hooks. You can set your toggle to individual origins and then scale down each of them individually. The real magic here is that you can grab each of the vertices and move them around individually, which will make animating the blade super simple. Arguably the most important part of the blade is the blade's color. So add a new emission shader for the blade object, set the color to whatever lightsaber color you want, and bring the strength up to like 50. The really important part here is that you're in the EV rendering engine with bloom turned on. Now you can really see that blade color show. A little piece for making things easier is turn on a filter for toggles and set toggles to selectability. Turn off all of the selectable toggles for everything except the empties that are hooked to the blade's vertices. Now that all the setup's done, it's the nitty-gritty parts, actually animating the blade. To make the blade animation a little easier, we're going to turn off the shader for the blade object by setting the viewport display to wireframe. Now going into the camera and adding auto framing in the bottom middle, we can start getting to work. Move the timeline to a place in the video where the blade is actually visible. Select one of the empties and move it by pressing G on your keyboard. Align each of the empties so that they line up with part of the blade. Preferably one of the corners is best. Once each of the empties are in the right place, skip forward about 3 or 4 frames, and then move them to realign with the blade. Repeat these steps for every frame of your animation, constantly lining up and going back and seeing how the animation plays out. You don't have to worry about doing every frame unless the blade is under high acceleration, because Blender will automatically interpolate between frames that you've set based off of the location of previous and future frames. Once you're ready to export, go into the output settings for your scene. Set the start frame to the start frame of your animation, and the end frame to the end frame. These can be found in the timeline very easily. Also make sure to set the frame rate of the animation the same as what the video was taken in. Blender defaults to 24 FPS, but I shot this video in 30 FPS. Once you have all these ready, set the output file type to AVI JPEG. Set the output path and name the video, and then export your animation. With your animation finished, there's only really 2 steps left: the audio and the final export. Take your video that you've just rendered and put it into your favorite audio or video editing software, and then use the assets that I've linked in the description for lightsaber sounds to add all kinds of sounds. This isn't really a scientific process, but just have fun with it. Once you're finished, export your final video and you're all done. So they did it. They made all the Star Wars. Now it's up to you to make cool stuff like this.